Welcome back to Baha'i on Air and to another deep dive. Today is Friday, February 27th, 2026.
Yes, it is.
And the vibrant, socially expansive days of Abdu'l-Bahá have literally just drawn to a close.
Just wrapped up, yeah.
Yeah, and we are standing quite literally on the precipice of the fast.
Which is such a profound shift in spiritual gears, if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're moving from this period defined by outward generosity and hospitality
Celebration.
and celebration
Yeah.
into a season that is inherently internal. It's solemn. It's deeply reflective.
It requires a complete reorientation of our daily rhythms and our internal posture, too.
Exactly. Which is honestly what makes the source material sitting on the table between us today incredibly timely.
It really is a remarkable pivot point in the calendar. The architecture of the Baha'i year deliberately places these two contrasting seasons. Well, it places them back to back for a reason.
Right.
You move from the ultimate expression of fellowship and abundance directly into an exercise of restraint, of asceticism.
And that juxtaposition isn't accidental at all.
No, not at all. It creates a specific kind of spiritual tension. And the text we are examining today captures the immense gravity and the unique opportunity embedded in this specific transition.
Yeah.
We are moving from the joy of community into a state of intense individual spiritual readiness, but doing so in a way that remains deeply connected to the world at large.
That tension you just mentioned is exactly what we are going to explore today. But before we get into the text itself, there is a bit of housekeeping that actually ties directly into how we navigate this transition over the next 19 days.
It's very relevant housekeeping.
It is. So first, for you, our listener, you should know that this is going to be our final deep dive until after Nowruz.
We're taking a deliberate pause.
Right. We are intentionally pausing our regular analytical formats during the fast. However, we are certainly not leaving the channel dormant.
No, we've actually been working on this for a while.
We have. We have curated some highly specific programming designed entirely to support the environment of the fasting period. So starting tomorrow, we will be releasing a daily musical piece by a musician named Julie Crotling.
And her compositions are exceptionally well suited for the season.
They really are.
There is a distinct difference between music meant for entertainment and music meant for contemplation.
Right.
Her work operates entirely in the latter sphere. It has a structural quality that doesn't demand your intellectual attention, but rather facilitates a quieting of the mind.
Yeah, it alters the acoustic environment in a way that truly supports internal focus.
Exactly.
That is precisely why we chose her work. And alongside Julie's daily releases, we are also introducing a daily meditative calming piece that functions essentially as background devotional music.
Which is so needed.
It is. And I want to pitch the utility of this directly to you listening right now. When you are waking up in the pre-dawn hours for your morning meditation.
Or when you are hosting a feast during the fast.
Yes, or even if you find yourself physically exhausted after sunset and just need something to help you relax and fall asleep. These tracks are designed specifically for that.
We want this to serve as the acoustic scaffolding for your spiritual reflection.
Beautifully put. You can look out for a new track every single day of the fast. And there's a larger vision here too. If there is enough interest and following from you, the channel is exploring the possibility of getting Julie Crotling's music officially published.
Which would be fantastic.
We would absolutely love to see her work available on CDs or streaming on platforms like Spotify, making it a permanent resource for the community.
Expanding access to art that elevates the human spirit is always a worthy endeavor. And the fast, by its very nature, asks us to strip away physical consumption, which often heightens our sensitivity to what we consume orally and visually. Providing a soundscape that reinforces the dignity and the solemnity of the season is just a very practical way to support the community's spiritual discipline.
It's all about creating that supportive environment. Now, recognizing that this is our last deep dive of the Baha'i year, we really must pause to express our deep, genuine gratitude to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone who has given us their time and their ear over these past months. I want to offer a special, heartfelt acknowledgement to the members who have formally joined and supported the channel.
We couldn't do it without you.
We really couldn't. The reality of independent media is that your membership support is exactly what keeps the lights on. It is what affords us the time to gather these sources, sit in this studio, and engage in these extensive analyses.
It's the engine of the whole project.
It is. And as we look toward the new Baha'i year on the other side of Nowruz, we are actively soliciting your input. The direction of this channel is a collaborative effort, so please reach out to us. What thematic areas or historical documents or theological concepts do you want us to tackle next?
Because the most robust intellectual explorations often begin with a single well-placed question from a listener.
That's so true.
The dialogue we have with the audience fundamentally shapes our editorial focus. Your inquiries force us to look at familiar texts through unfamiliar lenses, which is the entire purpose of this enterprise.
Okay, let's unpack this. Moving from the logistics of the season to the philosophical core of our deep dive today. What is the specific document we are confronting?
We are undertaking a comprehensive analysis of a message from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States.
Okay.
It is a letter specifically prepared for the Feast of Allah, dated March 10, 2026, bearing the signature of the Secretary Kenneth E. Bowers.
And our methodology today is going to be highly granular.
Very granular. We are going to examine this letter paragraph by paragraph, but more than that, sentence by sentence. We need to dissect the precise linguistic choices, the overarching spiritual tone, and the profound implications this message holds as we navigate the deeply complex realities of current world events.
Because this document is not just a perfunctory seasonal greeting.
Not at all. It constructs a rigorous philosophical and spiritual framework meant to dictate our internal posture for the next 19 days.
The density of the language in these communications always requires that level of scrutiny. You can't just skim it and absorb the intent.
I really can't.
I will begin by reading the opening paragraph, which anchors itself around an extraordinary quote from Bahá'u'lláh referred to here as the Blessed Beauty. The letter reads, "To the American Baha'i community for the Feast of Allah. Dearly loved friends, the National Spiritual Assembly sends its loving greetings to each of you, together with the assurance of its unceasing prayers for your happiness and well-being. The days of Ayami Ha have concluded, and the season of fasting begins. In one of his prayers, the Blessed Beauty described the special potency invested by God in this period of the Baha'i calendar."
And here's the quote.
Right. "Thou hast endowed every hour of these days with a special virtue, inscrutable to all except thee, whose knowledge embraceth all created things. Thou hast also assigned unto every soul a portion of this virtue in accordance with the tablet of thy decree and the scriptures of thine irrevocable judgment. Every leaf of these books and scriptures thou hast moreover allotted to each one of the peoples and kindreds of the earth."
It is just staggering. The National Spiritual Assembly immediately subverts our standard secular conception of time.
How so?
Well, they don't simply note that the calendar has turned. They present time as something malleable, something that can be actually charged or altered by the Creator. Look at the specific verb used by Baha'u'lláh. Thou hast endowed every hour of these days with a special virtue.
Endowed.
Yes, endowed. An endowment implies a permanent, deliberate bestowal of wealth or capacity.
Like endowing a university chair.
Exactly. We typically experience time as a neutral void. A Tuesday is just a container for whatever actions we put into it. But this text asserts an objective spiritual reality. During these specific 19 days, the actual fabric of time itself is not neutral. It is endowed.
It carries a potency.
Yes, a potency that is fundamentally absent during the rest of the year.
That concept of an objective, invisible reality layered over our normal perception of time is vital. If we think about how we interact with the unseen forces of the physical world, take radio waves or ultraviolet light, for instance.
It's a great analogy.
Right now, the physical space we are occupying in the studio is saturated with frequencies carrying immense amounts of data. We lack the biological sensory organs to perceive them.
To borrow the exact word from the translation, those waves are inscrutable to our eyes and ears.
Inscrutable, yes. Yet their presence is an undeniable physical fact. And with the correct receiver, we can translate that invisible reality into something we can hear or see. The text seems to be suggesting that the hours of the fast operate on a similar principle.
They are broadcasting on a higher spiritual frequency.
Exactly. They are endowed with this invisible virtue regardless of whether our limited spiritual senses detect it.
That analogy holds up incredibly well under the weight of the text, particularly because Baha'u'lláh explicitly identifies the limitation of our perception. He states this virtue is inscrutable to all except thee, whose knowledge embraceth all created things.
Inscrutable, meaning impossible to understand or interpret.
Right. It demands a posture of profound humility from us. It suggests that even the most spiritually attuned individual cannot fully map the physics, so to speak, of how a Tuesday afternoon during the fast fundamentally differs from a Tuesday in November.
We just don't have the instruments for it.
Our epistemology is finite. We cannot measure the weight of this special virtue, but we are asked to trust the omniscience of the Creator, whose knowledge embraceth all created things, and who has deliberately engineered this temporal period to hold this specific charge.
It requires a massive leap of intellectual and spiritual trust. You are essentially being asked to operate as if the air around you has changed, even though your lungs feel the exact same.
Then extending your radio receiver analogy, the receiver itself must be the physical and spiritual mechanics of the fast.
That's good.
The abstention from food, the disruption of sleep for prayer, the heightened focus on one's internal state. These aren't just arbitrary rules, they are the recalibration of the human instrument.
We are tuning the dial to intercept this inscrutable virtue.
Precisely.
Okay.
But that leads to the second half of the quote, which introduces an even more complex theological premise. Baha'u'lláh states, "Thou hast also assigned unto every soul a portion of this virtue in accordance with the tablet of thy decree and the scriptures of thine irrevocable judgment."
Yes, the text expands the scope from the nature of time to the distribution of grace. And the language here is strictly administrative and legalistic in a divine sense. Tablet of thy decree, scriptures of thine irrevocable judgment.
It's very precise.
It isn't a vague poetic scattering of blessings. It implies a highly structured, deliberate, and precise allocation. But the most staggering aspect is the universality of that allocation.
This is a crucial point. Religious paradigms frequently operate on closed economies of grace.
Right, the benefits of a specific ritual are exclusively reserved for the adherents who perform it.
Exactly. But Baha'u'lláh dismantles that exclusivity here. He states that a portion of this virtue is assigned to every soul.
That phrasing is absolute.
Yeah.
It does not say every fasting soul or every believing soul.
Every soul.
The individual living entirely unaware of the Baha'i calendar, the person working a night shift on another continent, the people leading nations, and the people entirely marginalized by society. According to this text, an irrevocable divine judgment has already assigned a specific portion of this endowed special virtue to them simply by virtue of their existence during these 19 days.
This completely upends the sociology of the fast. If we follow that thread further, it fundamentally alters the responsibility of the individual who is consciously observing the fast.
Because you aren't just doing it for yourself.
Right. The text continues, "Every leaf of these books and scriptures thou hast, moreover, allotted to each one of the peoples and kindreds of the earth. It democratizes the spiritual power of this season.
Wow.
Therefore, if you are a Baha'i waking up before dawn to pray and abstain from physical sustenance, you are not merely engaging in a private exercise of self-discipline, you are actively stepping into an atmosphere of universal endowment."
You are functioning as a conscious participant in a mechanism that is designed to distribute spiritual vitality to the peoples and kindreds of the earth.
Exactly.
How does that theological reality change the lived experience of the listener? I mean, when you wake up tomorrow morning, the physical reality is going to assert itself aggressively. You will feel the caffeine withdrawal. You will feel the hunger, the disruption to your circadian rhythm.
The sensation of deprivation is loud.
Very loud. But if you contextualize that physical discomfort within this framework, the narrative shifts entirely. You aren't merely enduring a lack of food. You are actively claiming your allotted portion of a virtue that saturates the hour.
And perhaps by tuning your own receiver, your prayers and your fast serve as a proxy.
In proxy.
Yes, somehow facilitating the unlocking of those portions assigned to the rest of humanity who cannot or do not fast. It turns an act of apparent passivity, not eating, into an act of intense global solidarity.
It transmutes the feeling of physical deprivation into a profound sense of spiritual agency.
It really does, and the National Spiritual Assembly grounds their letter in this specific quote because it establishes the necessary jurisdiction for the request they are about to make.
That makes sense.
You cannot grasp the weight of the specific prayers they ask for in the next paragraph unless you first accept the premise that the time in which you are praying has been weaponized, for lack of a better term, with divine virtue.
The hours are heavy with potential.
Yeah.
That perfectly bridges us to the second paragraph. The NSA is taking this universally endowed time and directing our attention almost like a magnifying glass, focusing sunlight onto a highly specific target. Let me read the next section.
Please do.
Inspired by these words, we ask that the Friends devote the coming 19 days to special prayers for the well-being of the people of Iran and the United States. As you are well aware, this year's fast will be observed under extraordinary circumstances for those living in these two nations. One, the cradle of the Baha'i faith, and the other, the cradle of its administrative order. We are assured in the Baha'i writings of the illustrious destinies of these countries, yet we are also made aware that the path ahead will be marked by inescapable trials for them as well as for the entire world. Both are aspects of God's plan for humanity.
This is a heavy paragraph.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The National Spiritual Assembly does not ask for a general prayer for world peace here. They explicitly pair two nations, Iran and the United States, and they assign them specific mirroring titles.
The invocation of the cradle terminology is dense with historical and teleological meaning.
Right.
As our audience knows, Iran is the physical birthplace of the faith, the geographical locus where the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh appeared. It is the soil soaked in the sacrifices of the early believers.
And the United States.
The United States is designated as the cradle of the administrative order. It is the environment where the structural and institutional blueprint of the faith was systematically nurtured and tested under the guidance of Abdu'l-Bahá and Shoghi Effendi.
But we must ask why the NSA is utilizing this specific metaphor of a cradle right now.
A cradle holds an infant. It implies something that is infinitely precious but also nascent, vulnerable, and far from its mature state.
That is a critical distinction. Calling them cradles acknowledges their monumental historical significance, but it simultaneously highlights their current immaturity relative to what they're supposed to become. The text notes we are assured of their illustrious destinies, but a baby in a cradle is not yet an illustrious adult. There's a vast, difficult developmental gap between the cradle and the destiny.
Precisely. And the text identifies the nature of that developmental gap. It states that the fast will be observed under extraordinary circumstances for those living in these nations.
Extraordinary circumstances.
Extraordinary is a carefully calibrated word. It suggests a departure from the normative functioning of history. It implies an acceleration, a period where the social, political, or spiritual pressures bend the standard rules of engagement.
And while the letter refrains from detailing specific daily news events, the pairing of these two profoundly different nations under the umbrella of extraordinary circumstances suggests a synchronized historical pressure.
And that pressure is explicitly defined in the very next sentence. We are made aware that the path ahead will be marked by inescapable trials for them as well as for the entire world.
Inescapable trials.
The adjective inescapable is chilling, but also deeply clarifying.
It strips away the illusion that if these nations simply enact the right policies or elect the right leaders or negotiate the right treaties, they can rout around the suffering.
The text posits that the trials cannot be bypassed. They are a structural requirement of the journey.
This confronts us with a fundamental question of theodicy, doesn't it? Why would a divine plan necessitate inescapable suffering?
In secular frameworks, a severe trial or a national crisis is almost universally interpreted as a systemic failure, an aberration to be avoided.
Right, glitch.
But the National Spiritual Assembly explicitly states both are aspects of God's plan for humanity, both the illustrious destiny and the inescapable trial.
The trial is not a glitch in the system. It is the operating system itself. It is the mechanism of transformation.
It brings to mind the physics of transformation in the natural world.
Like what?
If we look at the creation of a diamond, we are starting with carbon, a profoundly common, relatively soft element. If the destiny of that carbon is to become a diamond characterized by immense strength and clarity, the transformation cannot occur in a vacuum.
It cannot be achieved through gentle polishing.
No, the carbon must be violently subjected to crushing atmospheric pressure and unimaginable heat deep within the Earth's mantle. That extreme environment constitutes the inescapable trial of the carbon.
If you remove the pressure, the carbon remains ordinary.
Exactly. The structural integrity of the diamond is forged exclusively through its submission to the heat.
The physical parallel is exact. The heat and pressure radically alter the molecular bonding of the carbon. Similarly, the inescapable trials identified in the text are designed to alter the sociological and spiritual bonding of these nations, and by extension, the entire world.
The extraordinary circumstances are the heat and pressure required to crystallize a fractured humanity into a unified structure.
And this reframes the specific call to prayer issued by the NSA. They are not asking the community to pray that the trials vanish because they have just established that the trials are inescapable and divinely purposed.
That raises an incredibly difficult practical question for the listener.
Which is?
If you cannot pray for the pressure to stop because the pressure is making the diamond, what exactly are you praying for when you wake up during the fast?
The text asks for prayers for the well-being of the people.
Praying for well-being amidst an inescapable trial requires a sophisticated spiritual posture. It is a prayer for endurance.
Endurance.
It is a petition that the souls undergoing these extraordinary circumstances might possess the spiritual resilience, the clarity of vision, and the mutual solidarity required to survive the heat without disintegrating morally or spiritually.
You are praying that the trial achieves its transformative purpose without completely destroying the subject in the process.
It is a profound act of intercessory empathy, linking the quiet discipline of your fast to the macro-historical trauma of millions.
Which transitions us seamlessly into the third paragraph, where the National Spiritual Assembly invokes the writings of Shoghi Effendi to provide the exact architectural blueprint of this macro-historical trauma.
This is where the framework is really laid out.
How do we make sense of the heat and pressure? Let me read this excerpt from The Advent of Divine Justice.
Go ahead.
The synchronization of such world-shaking crises with the progressive unfoldment and fruition of their divinely appointed task is itself the work of providence, the design of an inscrutable wisdom, and the purpose of an all-compelling will, a will that directs and controls in its own mysterious way both the fortunes of the faith and the destinies of men. Such simultaneous processes of rise and of fall, of integration and of disintegration, of order and chaos, with their continuous and reciprocal reactions on each other, are but aspects of a greater plan. One and indivisible, whose source is God, whose author is Bahá'u'lláh, the theater of whose operations is the entire planet, and whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the Guardian's historical vision and the absolute mathematical precision of his vocabulary.
It is incredibly precise.
The paragraph opens with the word synchronization. This is not a synonym for coincidence.
Right, synchronization implies a conductor. It implies disparate gears locking into a single mechanism to drive a hand forward.
He is explicitly stating that the world-shaking crises ripping through the fabric of society are occurring in lockstep with the progressive unfoldment and fruition of their divinely appointed task.
That concept forces a radical cognitive shift.
It does.
It is so easy to view the progression of a spiritual community and the collapse of the secular world as two separate news feeds entirely unrelated. But Shoghi Effendi binds them together. The chaos isn't just happening at the same time as the spiritual unfoldment, it is synchronized with it.
And he assigns the authorship of the synchronization to three distinct facets of divine interaction: the work of providence, the design of an inscrutable wisdom, and the purpose of an all-compelling will.
There's that word again. Inscrutable.
We see the return of that word from the first paragraph. Our human intellect cannot map the exact causative link between a specific geopolitical disaster and a specific milestone in spiritual administration.
The wisdom behind the timing remains inscrutable to us.
But the all-compelling will guarantees that the trajectory is controlled.
He then elaborates on how that control manifests, and he uses these pairings of opposites. Simultaneous processes of rise and a fall, of integration and of disintegration, of order and chaos.
These pairings are so important.
When we look at the world, our natural bias, perhaps because of our survival instincts, is to hyperfixate on the fall, the disintegration, and the chaos.
Because that is what generates headlines.
Exactly. That is what generates visceral fear. The integration and the order are often quieter, slower, and less visible, but he insists they are simultaneous.
They are more than simultaneous. He identifies their continuous and reciprocal reactions on each other.
Reciprocal reactions.
This is the dialectic of history. The disintegration of obsolete social and political structures is actively generating the necessity for integration.
The chaos is creating the vacuum that the new order must fill.
They are not opposing forces in a war where one might accidentally win. They are symbiotic processes driving toward a singular conclusion.
Let me offer an analogy to ground this abstract concept.
Please.
Imagine you have purchased an ancient, structurally compromised house with the intention of completely remodeling it into a secure modern home.
Okay.
To achieve the integration of the new design, running new plumbing, pouring a reinforced foundation, opening up the floor plan, you must first take a sledgehammer to the rotting drywall.
You have to rip up the decayed floorboards.
You must actively initiate the disintegration of the old structure. Now consider the perspective of someone living inside that house who has never seen the architect's blueprint.
To them, it's terrifying.
To them, the deafening noise, the dust, the walls collapsing, it looks like the apocalypse. It looks like pure, meaningless chaos. But the architect understands that the tearing down of the old wall is in perfect synchronization with the framing of the new one.
The chaos is the absolute prerequisite for the new order.
Yes.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the psychological dissonance of living through this era. We are inhabitants of a house undergoing a violent remodel, and the Guardian is providing us with the blueprint so that we do not succumb to the terror of the dust and the noise.
He defines this entire dual process, the tearing down and the building up, as aspects of a greater plan, one and indivisible.
The chaos is not outside the plan, it is a feature of the plan.
And the scale of this remodel is absolute. The quote states, "The theater of whose operations is the entire planet."
There is no safe room in the house that is exempt from the construction.
But the true anchor of this entire paragraph, the sentence that makes it possible to endure the inescapable trials mentioned earlier, is the final teleological statement. What is the end goal of this terrifying synchronization?
Whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind.
The unity and the peace.
Every ounce of pressure, every world-shaking crisis, every agonizing process of disintegration is strictly utilitarian. It is a tool wielded by providence to force a fractured species into structural unity.
If the listener can internalize that objective, the nature of their anxiety changes.
The suffering of the world is no longer tragic evidence of a meaningless void. It is the labor pains of an inescapable peace.
But bridging the gap between intellectually understanding that blueprint and emotionally surviving the construction noise is incredibly difficult.
It's the hardest part.
It is one thing to know the chaos serves a purpose. It is another to not let the fear paralyze you in your daily life. And that is exactly the psychological hurdle the National Spiritual Assembly addresses in the final paragraphs of their letter.
Let's look at that conclusion.
I'll read it now. In the same passage, the guardian of the cause of God reminded us that, quote, reflections such as these should steel the resolve of the entire Baha'i community, should dissipate their forebodings and arouse them to rededicate themselves to every single provision of that divine charter whose outline has been delineated for them by the pen of Abdu'l-Bahá, unquote. We hope that this special time of prayer will serve as a source of strength and inspiration as we prepare to discharge our sacred tasks in the second phase of the 9-year plan. With warmest Baha'i love, National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, Kenneth E. Bowers, Secretary.
This concluding section functions as a masterclass in psychological alchemy.
Alchemy is a great word for it.
The Guardian recognizes that witnessing inescapable trials and world-shaking crises naturally breeds foreboding, a deep, persistent dread about the future.
Yet he claims that reflecting on these very crises should dissipate their forebodings.
How does staring directly at global disintegration cure one's fear of it?
It is a brilliant paradox. If you look at the chaos without the framework, the dread is justified. But if you look at the chaos through the framework of the greater plan, the dread evaporates.
Because foreboding is ultimately rooted in the fear of randomness.
Exactly. It is the fear that no one is at the wheel, that the suffering is pointless, and that the universe is indifferent. The moment you recognize the chaos as the work of providence, the randomness is eliminated.
You are still watching the walls fall down, but you know the architect is present.
Yes, it replaces existential terror with historical clarity.
And the Guardian does not ask the community to simply sit in a state of enlightened calm.
No, not at all.
The dissipation of fear is meant to clear the runway for action. He states these reflections should steel their resolve and arouse them to rededicate themselves.
The National Spiritual Assembly then operationalizes that arousal by pointing directly to the divine charter of Abdu'l-Bahá and the sacred tasks in the second phase of the 9-year plan.
Which brings us to the application.
So what does this all mean for the listener standing in their kitchen tomorrow morning before dawn? It forces a dramatic pivot from the macro to the micro.
We just spent 20 minutes dissecting global integration, the destinies of nations, and the theater of the entire planet.
It is easy to feel paralyzed by the sheer scale of those forces. But the text aggressively grounds us. It says your response to the disintegration of global structures is to rededicate yourself to the microstructures of your immediate community.
This is the genius of the Baha'i administrative and spiritual framework. It provides a localized outlet for global anxieties.
When the world feels entirely out of control, you are tasked with actions that are entirely within your control.
You cannot single-handedly stop a world-shaking crisis, but you can teach a children's class.
You can initiate a study circle.
You can elevate the nature of the conversation in your neighborhood. Those highly localized, seemingly minor acts of community building are the literal physical manifestation of the integration the Guardian described.
You are driving the nails into the new framework while the old house collapses outside your window.
It creates a seamless feedback loop between prayer and action. The National Spiritual Assembly is framing the fast not as a retreat from the horrors of the world, but as the refueling station required to confront them.
You endure the physical discipline of the fast to tune your receiver to that inscrutable virtue endowing the hour. You use that spiritual clarity to pray for the well-being of nations undergoing immense pressure.
And then you take the resolve forged in that prayer and apply it directly to the grassroots work of the 9-year plan.
It is an integrated system of spiritual survival and societal construction. And the tone of the sign-off for the National Spiritual Assembly with warmest Baha'i love should not be overlooked.
Absolutely not. They have just delivered a letter dealing with inescapable trials, chaos, and global crises, yet they wrap it in an expression of profound warmth.
It underscores that this communication is not meant to frighten the community, but to arm it.
It is an act of deep administrative care, ensuring the believers have the theological and psychological armor necessary to thrive in the coming days.
It is an astonishingly dense, brilliant piece of guidance. To summarize an entire theology of history, an architecture of crisis, and a mandate for daily action within 4 paragraphs is a staggering achievement.
It really is.
As we conclude this deep dive, which marks our final session before Nowruz, I want to attempt to distill this hour of analysis into a single provocative thought for you to carry into the silence of your fast. We have explored a text that asserts unequivocally that every hour of these next 19 days is prominently endowed with a special virtue by the Creator, and that an irrevocable judgment has allotted a portion of that virtue to every single human being on earth.
Concurrently, we are explicitly directed to focus our spiritual energies on the extraordinary circumstances and inescapable trials afflicting specific nations.
Recognizing that this terrifying friction is the exact mechanism Providence is using to forge the unity of the human race. Here's the question I want you to sit with. Could it be that the very act of your fasting, the physical discipline, the pre-dawn prayers, the conscious tuning of your internal receiver to capture that endowed virtue is not merely a symbolic gesture of piety, but the actual invisible mechanism by which the world survives its disintegration?
We constantly search for massive political, economic, or technological interventions to rescue humanity from the chaos.
But what if the true fulcrum of history is spiritual? How does your quiet, unseen dedication in the dark hours of the morning over these next 19 days directly alter the atmospheric pressure of the world, tipping the scales just enough to ensure the illustrious destinies of these nations can finally emerge from the rubble? I urge you to rigorously explore the weight of your own agency as you move through this sacred season.
That is the ultimate revelation of this text. It obliterates the boundary between the individual soul and the destiny of the human race. Your internal discipline is a matter of global consequence.
It truly is. This has been a deeply challenging and incredibly rewarding text to navigate with you. I am profoundly grateful we could synthesize this framework before the season begins. Thank you, and happy Ayam to you all. And for those who are fasting, enjoy this deep, meditative, and reflective period.